Oh, can you hear me?
You may have to log off with me to log on with them so they can see you.
You can't hear me though.
Hello.
John, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, go on there. I can see you on. Yeah, I can see you on there.
Okay. Jonathan, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. We have
That's all right.
lots of folks
When you
joining
get on
us.
there, turn on your cameras.
If you'd initially mute your mics, so as we get going here, and you have questions, unmute. But we want to keep the extraneous sounds away. But welcome everyone to our virtual version of Creepy Crawlers or Beneficial Bugs, a look at the bountiful number of insects that reside in the Midlands in our 12,000 Year History Park and Congaree National Park. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be looking at the setting of the natural landscape along the Congaree River of both parks. I'm John Jameson, Heritage Consultant with the City of Casey, and I'll host and moderate this virtual session, which is a reflection of our in-person tours at the park along the Timberman Trail, which we hope to be able to stage once again in the park later this year. The 12,000 Year History Park is a little under 400 acres at the southern portion of the Timberman Trail within the City of Casey in Lexington County. The park is rich in both natural and cultural resources. Some of the features, the cultural features of the site are a 1718 fort along the Cherokee Path and a Civil War battlefield that was, the battle was fought 2 days before the burning of Columbia in 1865. The main landscape feature associated with that battle is about a mile long, pristinely preserved earthenworks, which we interpret out there. And now we have about 24 educational interpretive signs that help guide you. But we give in-person tours. Hopefully we'll be able to open that back up later this year, later this spring. This Zoom session is the latest of a series of 16 Zoom sessions since last October, highlighting the extremely rich cultural and natural resources of the 12,000 Year History Park. There are many things that Congaree National Park and the 12,000 Year History Park have in common, including an excellent habitat for the diverse number of insect species that they call home. Insects have been around for about 500 million years and may have originated at the same time as terrestrial plants. They also may have evolved from a group of early crustaceans. In this session, we are again privileged to have a guest speaker, Park Ranger Jonathan Manchester from Congaree National Park. And without further ado, John, I'll turn it over to you and tell us about those bugs.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining in. Sorry, I'm gonna do one last thing here. As I get my presentation ready. So, like John said, insects have been around for centuries, millennia, eons. They have been around for millions of years. We can find insects that have been preserved in the tree sap of prehistoric trees that, you know, gives us some insight into what insects were living in times well before humans have written or even were around. And we can get a glimpse at their size, their shape, and how they've changed over many thousands of years, millions of years. And some of you may be more familiar with Jurassic Park and their little and their bit about pulling DNA from ancient mosquitoes out of those insects and cloning dinosaurs. Couldn't happen. So they can't give us dinosaurs, but they can give us a glimpse into what life was like at around the same time, aside from dinosaurs. But insects are still around today, and some insects we love to see around. Other insects we might not like to see around. But every insect that is around us in our backyards, in the parks, where we like to go and recreate, they all do have a purpose. There is a reason for them to be around. And even if they're bothersome to each of us, there is a reason for them to be there. And hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit about that, and maybe I can change your minds on some insects that you might not like seeing around. I don't know. Some insects I don't think I'll ever change anybody's minds on, but maybe I can give you at least a different perspective on them. So I'm gonna share my screen here real quick. I'm gonna pop this up, and then I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everybody see? And I wish it wasn't going so fast. Can everybody see that that picture right there?
Yeah, we see it.
All right, good. So probably one of the insects most of us are familiar with are butterflies. We'll probably start seeing more and more butterflies as the days get warmer. And Congaree National Park and the 12,000 Year History Park is a great area for butterflies. Plenty of plants and flowers for them to use and feed on. So this butterfly right here that's on the screen, this is a what's called a Gulf Fritillary butterfly. Got two pictures of it so you can see it from a couple different angles. So that's if you were looking at it straight from the top. Very beautiful orangish red with black spots, and then on the sides it has that beautiful white, black, and orange as well. Looks kind of similar to a monarch, but it is a different butterfly species. And butterflies are a type of insect that we call pollinators, because one of the big things that they do is help to pollinate the plants that live all around us. We think of them mostly as going to flowers, and that's where we see most of them, but other trees do have pollen that they can get a hold of and will go and will carry around. So this butterfly right here is one of our smaller butterflies. It's one of the more common ones we see at Congaree National Park, and I have seen them in the 12,000 Year History Park as well. This one is on, I think it's a type of lobelia. I couldn't tell because it's not fully flowered out yet, and plants are not my speciality. And there are so many different plants at Congaree National Park, over 700 different species, that it's hard to memorize them all. But it's on this flower right here, and it is gathering the nectar, and it will also carry that pollen as it's standing on that flower. It'll carry the pollen to other plants as well to help to pollinate and keep on going those different flower species. So we also have this butterfly. This is called the Eastern Comma. There's another butterfly that looks very similar to it. It's called a question mark. And that comes mainly from the shape in their wings. If you look kind of over on the top top wing, kind of has a little bit of a curvy look, kind of like a comma, and so that's where that name comes from. So it is also a pollinator, just like the Gulf Fritillary. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit duller orange, but still a fun butterfly to look for and see in the park. And then this is a southern pearl eye butterfly. It's a butterfly that likes to spend its time over in the wetter areas in the floodplain of the park. And it holds its wings much differently than the other two did. So as you saw with those previous two, they like to hold their wings open most of the time when they're stationary. This one will keep its wings pretty much straight up in the air when it's standing still. It doesn't keep its wings open. It might open them a little bit, but for the most part, it stands very much like you see it in this picture right here. There are a couple other different types of pearl eyes that you can find. They look very similar. There's the Creole pearl eye that we also can see at the park. And you can tell the difference in the spots on its wings. That one has, I believe, one less spot than this one does. So if you only see it for an instant, it'll be kind of hard to tell the difference unless you're an expert butterfly identifier. But these are really fun little butterflies to watch. They blend in really, really, really well with their landscape because they're living in an area that has lots of dead leaves and the soil's wet, so it's darker and browner. And so they blend in really, really well with their surroundings. This is a butterfly I see more in the later summer and fall, but you can see it, fairly often throughout the year. And then this is not a butterfly. This is a moth. So butterflies and moths are similar in many ways, but are also very different. As you can see, this moth, which is a Luna moth, its antennae up here have that kind of feathery pattern. And if we go back to our butterfly here, it does not have that same antennae. It's got very, typical antennae for an insect, very long and straight with those little receptors up here at the top. But the Luna moth is this is a brilliant green moth that when you see it, you recognize it. It stands out. They unfortunately, and this is the case for many kinds of moths, they don't live very long. When butterflies and moths reach this stage where they're at their most beautiful, at their most recognizable, they're also at the end of their life stage. They're at the end of their lives. So their purpose at this stage of their life is to find a mate and to carry on the species, to allow for new Luna moths to be made and born so that their species can continue. But these are also pollinators, even though they are not eating. Many moths actually don't have the capacity to eat. Because their sole purpose at this point is to just carry on the species. But they are pollinators. They will land on flowers and things of that nature, and they will carry pollen to other places as well. And that's not to say that every moth doesn't eat, but many don't. And moths are actually one of the most diverse species of insects we actually have at Congaree National Park. a number of years ago, some scientists came in to actually do a survey of all of the moth species within the park, and they found and were able to identify over 1,000 different species of moths alone. That's not butterflies, that is moths. So we've got moths and butterflies, thousands of different types. And many of them, if you were to see them, they may not look like different species to you because some of them look very, very similar to one another. And it takes a really expert eye to take a look at those. And some of those identifications have to be made under a microscope. You've got to actually take that butterfly and actually look at it much closer to be able to identify exactly what kind of moth. Look at that moth under a microscope to see what kind it is. So this is probably one of the most charismatic species of insects we have at Congaree National Park. Everyone loves to see butterflies and moths because they're really not a threat to any of us. They don't do anything to us that we don't like. They're pretty. They are something we enjoy seeing, and we know the benefits that they provide. But there are other insects that we have that people might not like as much. So here's another insect that I think pretty much everybody is familiar with. This is your honeybee. Honeybees, we all know what benefit they provide to us. Not only are they very prolific pollinators, they also provide that sweet, sticky substance that we like to put on our biscuits or rolls or in our tea, or some of us just like to drink straight from the bottle. But honeybees are a very, very important insect, and they are actually not native to the United States. They actually were introduced. They were brought here. If you were to read the works of naturalists from the 1800s, like John James Audubon, he would actually talk about how honeybees were just making their way into the West when he was traveling out there in the late 1830s, early 1840s. So honeybees were introduced, but they have become established here in the United States, and they aren't a species of insect that has pushed anything out. So they are they're a non-native species that is not a bad thing for us to have. They are pollinators, so they do pollinate many of our flowers, and unfortunately, they are an insect that is in danger. They are unfortunately facing a number of threats that, if they were to disappear, we could see some problems begin to arise. And this isn't just in the United States, this is worldwide. Bee populations have begun to decline. They face threats from things like pesticides. Unfortunately, in order to keep some of the insect pests that we don't want in our gardens out, we spray pesticides on our plants, and it may not necessarily kill bees immediately, but they pick those things up and it makes its way back to the hive. And unfortunately, it can cause a lot of problems. There are also other threats, such as other insects that will take out whole hives of bees. There are a couple invasive species that we are pretty familiar with. One is the Africanized honeybee. We know them more typically as killer bees. We haven't seen them here in our area, as far as I'm aware, but they will take out nests of honeybees. And one that hasn't spread to the United States yet, but unfortunately has been found in Washington. One we heard about last year in May, called the Asian bald-faced hornet, or more typically the murder hornet. they will basically enter a beehive and basically just kill all the bees. They've only been seen over in a small area of the West Coast. They're not here. So they aren't a threat to our honeybees here in South Carolina at this point, and hopefully never will be. Hopefully they've been able to contain that out there in Washington State. But this small beehive was spotted over near one of our canoe landings late last spring, and it's no longer an active hive. We don't know if it was just a hive that was created as a kind of a stopover point. But what these bees are doing is they are all basically staying right around each other and keeping each other warm. And within that swarm, there is a queen. And what most likely happened is a queen left another nest somewhere, another hive, and all these bees followed her and are keeping her warm. So these bees may have just been staying over for a few days in this spot and then move on because that area is now empty. That the little hive, little cone there is still there, but the bees themselves are gone. So we have been doing studies on honeybees in Congaree National Park just to see their genetic diversity and try to learn more about their patterns here. Here's another one of those bees that we have at the park. This is a bumblebee. Bumblebees are bigger than honeybees. They don't produce honey. And they really aren't anything to be scared of, even though they're bigger. They really don't sting humans. They're pretty gentle, gentle giants as bees go. And you can see this bumblebee right here is on our state flower, actually, Carolina jessamine, yellow jessamine. And it's this is a bee you will see on Carolina jessamine. You will not see honeybees on Carolina jessamine because Carolina jessamine actually, if you were to find honey made from this, it would actually be poisonous. You could not eat it. So you won't see honeybees on our Carolina jessamine, but bumblebees will go to it because bumblebees aren't producing honey. That's not what they do. They don't live in hives. They typically live in burrows, pretty much solitary. But they'll go after Carolina jessamine, and you'll find them pollinating that flower. But they aren't making honey, so it's not gonna get into our product on our grocery shelves. So bumblebees are pretty prolific around Carolina jessamine, and they're fun little insects to watch. I love watching bumblebees. They just kind of buzz around, climbing up into those flowers and then just going around and pollinating them. Now here's another bee species that we have. This is a what we call a ground bee, and we typically only see these in the spring. So we'll see them along like the Bluff Trail right outside the visitor center. They are also a non-aggressive, non-stinging species of bee. I believe they do have a method of defense, but they don't. I've never had a problem with these bees. They basically stay around their little burrows in the ground and don't even really go after a person if a person's standing there watching them. This nest was actually in an area where we had a prescribed fire a few years back, and they were just buzzing around their hive, which is underground. It was completely protected. That fire didn't get too hot, so it didn't do any damage to their nest. Even though they're nesting in the ground like yellow jackets, nothing to be afraid of. And they are also pollinators, so they're helping to pollinate flowers around the area where they're living. And they're also a species of bee that does not produce any kind of honey. So they are seen for maybe a month or two in the spring. I don't see them for very long, but they're fun. They're fun insects to watch, just kind of buzzing around in the leaf litter along park trails. And they'll be typically found in the upper portions of Congaree National Park. So the same probably for the 12,000 Year History Park. You could probably find them in some of the leaf litter on the upper areas, up around like the Timberman Trail, above the creek bank and everything. Now, this looks like a bee. Most of us, if we were to see it, would say that's a bee, but this is actually a bee mimic. This is what we call a robber fly. If you take a look at its face right here, it definitely has the eyes of a fly, not of a bee. And you can tell from its wings, because here are how a bee typically will keep its wings. It keeps its wings out, or if you look at the bees here, I can zoom in on this picture. You can see that bees typically kind of keep their wings. They might be back, but they're much more at an angle, rather than they don't really touch here on their abdomen and thorax, whereas that robber fly, the wings are just straight back. So it is a mimic, so it'll try to, it looks like a bee, so it can get in and actually eat bees. So it looks like one, so it can blend in and get itself a meal. So robber flies come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. You'll also see them typically kind of hovering. They don't fly like a typical bee does. And they look kind of scary, but they can't sting you. So they don't have a stinger. So they're not something that can really harm you as a human. But this next insect, you don't want to touch. This right here, and I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can get a little better look at it. So right here, this is what's known as a velvet ant, or it's also known as a cow killer. It can't really kill cows, but it is actually a species of wasp. It is a wingless wasp. It's not an ant, as its name might make you think it is, but it is an insect that has a very powerful sting, and it gets that name cow killer because its sting hurts if you are ever to get stung by one. So if you see a velvet ant on the ground, don't pick it up. Leave it be, because it may feel like you're dying when you get stung by one. There's a fellow on YouTube who actually goes out and gets stung for fun by insects, and he has been stung by a velvet ant. He put one on his hand to get stung on purpose, and he was in some pain. It hurt quite a bit. But you will typically see them kind of crawling around up in the upland portions of Congaree National Park. It would be the same for the 12,000 Year History Park. So they're typically solitary. They'll just be crawling around. They stand out because they are very bright red, and they look fuzzy and pleasant, but just leave them be. And they actually will go into the burrows of insects like ground bees and stay in there and feed on other insects that are living in those ground burrows. So here's another one of those insects. This is one that people they see spiders and they're like, oh, spiders. Spiders are creepy. They are definitely crawly. Some of you on this call may even have arachnophobia, or just say you have arachnophobia. It may just be you just don't like spiders. But this is a spider that we see pretty commonly through Congaree National Park. It's one that almost every visitor comments on to us. I haven't seen too many at the 12,000 Year History Park, but I would assume they're probably there too. This is the golden silk orb weaver. Some people may call it a banana spider. And it gets its name from the silk of its webbing. And you can see that very well in this picture. It is a yellow color, golden. So it's a relatively large spider. They are big, which is why they are typically so scary for people when they see them. But they're gentle giants. They don't really bother people. If one was to bite a person, which I have not heard of one ever doing so at Congaree National Park, the bite is like that from a horsefly. It hurts, but it's never really caused anybody any problems. So it's not like that of a black widow or a brown recluse. It won't cause any really negative side effects. But this is a spider that is not just a big spider, but it's also an indicator of a change in our climate here. So this is a coastal species of spider. It's always been here in South Carolina, but it has typically only been down in the coastal regions of the state, where it typically stays just a bit warmer than we get up here. And so it's able to survive there. The winters there don't get cold enough to kill the young. Here at Congaree and in the Midlands, at one point it was cold enough in the winters that the young would never survive. So if they made it up here, they wouldn't really. The adults might make it up here. They may lay eggs, but it would not be typical to see them commonly. But now they are prolific throughout Congaree National Park because over the years, our winters have been getting just warm enough that the young that after they hatch out, they live under the leaf litter and under leaves and small ground shrubs. They can survive. So I remember seeing them for the first time when I got here in 2013, and they weren't everywhere. I'd see them, but they weren't as prolific as they are now at Congaree National Park. Now we see them everywhere starting around the end of July and going up through October. Now, in this picture, you see another spider on that web. That is a male golden silk orb weaver. And you can tell just from this picture that they are very different in size. The female is much larger than the male. And the male of this species, and there typically will be a few males on each web. The males of the species, they are there for one purpose, and that is to carry on the species. And we know about certain species of spiders that are cannibalistic towards the opposite gender, and golden silk orb weavers aren't cannibalistic towards the males, but they do kind of have a little bit of a love-hate relationship. So if the male is going to try and mate with the female, what he will do is he will wait until she's actually eating something. So he wants her to be distracted by something. And so what the males will do, and I've actually gotten to watch this firsthand, it's very interesting. Once she is actually feeding on an insect, what the male will do is he will come down the web and he will actually use one of his legs to kind of tap on the web and see if she reacts to it. And if she doesn't react and is just fully involved in her meal, then he will come up behind her and he will do what he needs to do to pass on his part of his genetic material. But if she is not fully involved in that meal, she will quickly turn around and let him know it. In some cases, they have been known to kill the male, but typically she just turns around and he'll scurry back up the web And she's just letting them know, nope, I'm not having any of it right now. So it's a really interesting species of spider to watch. We also have another very beautiful species of spider we have in the park, also kind of big, called a marbled orb weaver. This species of spider I typically only see in the fall, and they only get this very beautiful swollen marbled abdomen and thorax late in their life, and they just have a beautiful marbled pattern on their back. They are much smaller than that golden silk orb weaver, but they are also one of our more easily spotted spiders in Congaree National Park. Now, many of us see spiders and we get creeped out by them. They've got 8 eyes, they've got 8 legs, they build these webs, they trap things for their meals. It's creepy. But spiders are actually a really important animal to have, and they are not they are not like other insects. They are arachnids. So these have 8 legs. Insects have 6. And so while they're grouped in with insects, they are, I don't believe, considered an insect. I can't remember, but they are very different in many different ways. But if we didn't have them, we'd have a lot of other insects out there that we don't want. My wife gives me a hard time because if I find a spider in the house, I actually take it outside. I will actually scoop it up and take it outside and put it out in the garden or put it out in the yard, because it's not doing anything to me that's any harm. A black widow or brown recluse would be a little bit different because that can cause some harm. So those I don't really abide in my house. If they're outside in the environment around, whatever, but in my house I don't abide those. But most spiders are not, they're not a threat to us. And even though they are venomous, their bites really won't hurt us, and they really don't want to bite us because we're not their food. So they are one of those animals that people see and they don't like because they are creepy, but they're really, really, really important. This right here is one of our beetles at the park. This is a female Triceratops beetle. Beetles like this are important because they are part of the decomposition process, especially in their young. The grubs will be typically in dead logs and dead rotting logs, and they're eating and decomposing that matter. They're recycling it and putting it back into the system, as Rudy Mankey would say. And so the Triceratops beetle, they are these beautiful kind of shiny black beetles that you can find if you find like a dead log and kind of lift up the bark as it's peeling off, or maybe in a rotting log, it's kind of soft, you pull it apart a little bit. You can find these within those decomposing parts of a forest. So they are a really important insect to have around. We need them. Most people aren't as scared of these beetles as maybe other kinds of beetles, but they are a very important insect to have around. We also have things like staghorn beetles, and the male of this species actually does have kind of a long proboscis, this long snout that kind of comes up like a rhinoceros's horn, you would see maybe at the zoo with a rhino. The female kind of has these 2 little, curved horns up there. Now the insect that everybody kind of knows Congaree for are fireflies. This is an insect that we see typically starting in the spring. These are our synchronized fireflies. We do have other fireflies in the park as well that aren't synchronized. But fireflies are a very charismatic insect that we love to see around the park. And the synchronized fireflies especially are very special because you don't find them many places. There's only a few places where it's publicly accessible that you can come to see them. Congaree is one of them. And this species right here is different from the one that they see in the Great Smokies. Ours is Photorus frontalis. They have a species in the Great Smokies called Photinus carolinus. Their flash patterns are different. But the synchronized fireflies, they come out for about 2 weeks every spring around the middle of May at Congaree National Park. It's become a very popular event. Last year, we were not able to hold that event, and we are still discussing whether we'll be able to hold that event this year. So no decision has been made at this point for Congaree National Park whether we will be able to have our Synchronized Fireflies Festival this year as well. So for those who are wondering, stay tuned to our website, stay tuned to social media. We will announce that as soon as we have been able to make a decision on that. But fireflies are not flies. They're actually a type of beetle, and they actually light up due to a chemical reaction within their bodies. They have they have a chemical and an enzyme, luciferin and luciferase, that allow them to light up. And that lighting process is their means of communication. They don't make a sound like some other insects do. They communicate via light. And so each species has a distinct flash pattern. Our Photorus frontalis, they actually flash one flash every 3/4 of a second. Photinus carolinus up in the Great Smokies, they have a series of, I think, 4 or 5 flashes, a long pause, and then 4 or 5 flashes and a long pause. And there are other species of fireflies that will actually mimic different species, and that is a way to lure up the males so that a female can have a meal. Because there are certain species of fireflies that don't produce those same enzymes. They can light up, but they don't have as much of one as they do another. And that is what makes these insects these fireflies not palatable to many other animals. So bats and other insect-eating creatures, they won't go after fireflies because they taste gross. It would basically be like you picking up a lemon and just biting into it. Most of us would be like, ugh, that's gross, it's sour. But certain insects and other creatures do eat fireflies. Probably one of the most well-known ones for fireflies is the harvestman, or as you more commonly know it, daddy longlegs. They do eat fireflies. But these fireflies, when they come out, it's a magical show. And if we're not able to have it this year, I'm sure next year we'll be able to have our Fireflies Festival and be back to our normal operations. And these fireflies like wet areas right along the edge of floodplains. So they are in other places as well. And I know there are other parks like the 12,000 History Park that have been looking to see if they have those synchronized fireflies too, to see if maybe they can do something similar to the Firefly Festival here at Congaree National Park. I'm sure that's something John and his crew have been working on, researching and determining. Now, the insect everybody loves to hate, the mosquito. Congaree is known for them. You've been to Congaree, you know our mosquito meter. At certain times of the year, the mosquitoes are abundant and very bothersome. And they're an insect none of us like. They bite, they itch, Some of us have worse reactions to them than others. They make sitting out on the back porch or the front porch in the summertime a hassle. And so for humans, they are quite an annoyance. And we do whatever we can to keep them away from ourselves. We spray ourselves with bug spray. We light candles that keep them away around our yards, and we may even have the exterminator come and spray our yard once or twice a year to keep mosquitoes away. And while mosquitoes can be very harmful, they do carry viruses and other diseases that can cause serious health issues to humans. They are also an important insect to have around because they are a food source for other animals, things like chimney swifts, barn swallows, purple martins, bats. They eat these things. So they are a food source for different animals. And not every mosquito is a biting mosquito. Not every mosquito goes after blood as its meal. Some are vegetarians and they are pollinators. There are mosquitoes that do act as pollinators. So they do serve a role similar to butterflies and bees. So not every mosquito is a bad species of mosquito. They do serve other purposes than to just be an annoyance during the summer. And by spraying our yards, while it keeps mosquitoes away, it gets rid of them, it unfortunately gets rid of all the other insects that we do want to see in our yards. So those butterflies, fireflies, honeybees, and other bees, it kills those insects too. It causes problems for them as well. So no insecticide that gets sprayed on a yard is specifically formulated to just go after mosquitoes. It goes after every insect. So one thing we do have to keep in mind when we call out the pest control people to spray for mosquitoes is, I want to get rid of mosquitoes, but do I want to get rid of every other beneficial insect that might be in my yard as well? And so when we think about that, there's other ways to keep mosquitoes away. Things such as putting up bat boxes or purple martin houses. There's certain plants that you can plant in your yard that will repel mosquitoes. So there are other ways to keep them away from the areas of your yard that you might want to enjoy without mosquitoes, but also ensure that you can keep other insects that you do want coming around and to help their survival as well. And one insect you might want to have around to help control mosquitoes is the dragonfly. Dragonflies are mosquito eaters. So if you see them buzzing around areas like Congaree National Park or the 12,000 History Park, they're eating mosquitoes. They're hunting mosquitoes. So they're zipping around, catching them out of the air, and they can eat mosquitoes like it's nobody's business. So they're eating dozens of mosquitoes a day. And so they're an insect that you want around. So if you have a little backyard pond, if you got dragonflies, they'll help keep your mosquito population down. So the best way to control mosquitoes, to keep them away from your backyard haven, is to ensure that you have other things around that can help get rid of them. So dragonflies, bats, certain species of birds, they are the ones that you want to help control your mosquitoes, not necessarily a chemical that does not discriminate against the insects that it takes out. So these are just some of the insects we have at the park. We've got dozens and dozens, hundreds and hundreds of different types of insects. So if you come out to Congaree National Park or the 12,000 History Park, keep your eyes open. Take a look around. See what insects you might see. And if you see a spider, maybe it's kind of creepy, but maybe think about the good things it does. Same with dragonflies, even the same with mosquitoes. So with that, I will open it up to any questions. And if John, you have anything to say, anything to add, please feel free. But if anybody has any questions, please let me know. You can type that in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone and ask that way. But thanks for all for joining, and I open it up.
Didn't there used to be giant centipedes that were like 6 feet long?
There may have been larger centipedes at one point. I don't know of any centipedes that are 6 feet long now, but there were times well in the past much larger insects than we see today because the environment could support them. But we do have millipedes at the park. They don't hurt anybody. Centipedes, I have not seen. I don't believe they're something we see here in the East. They're more of a, you see them more out west, and they can sting, they can hurt. What are some early beetles and dragonflies that we might see? And what's your favorite insect? So, favorite insect? I mean, I love the fireflies. The fireflies are fun to watch. They are a very they're also a challenge, because I mean, that photo of the fireflies that was taken, that was a photo I took for the park. And they're a fun challenge. And you only get to see them once or twice a year. I do love watching butterflies. They're fun. They're fun to watch, and to see the different, many different species that we can see around. But I don't know if I can say I have a favorite insect. They're fun to watch. But no, I do like the fireflies, and I do love watching butterflies. Early beetles. I mean, we'll start seeing some of our the Triceratops beetles starting to pop out soon. Patent leather beetles will be starting to come out. I think they're a little bit longer than the Triceratops beetle. And dragonflies. I'm not sure what the earlier species are, but you might see some of the darners. I believe that was a blue darner in that picture that I showed. You might see things like yellow clubtails. As the weather starts to warm up, they'll start popping out. But there are guidebooks for dragonflies that you can get out on the market that helps you to identify them, and they'll tell you what time of year they come out more commonly. If you can get people to do one thing for insect conservation in their own yard, community garden, or green space, what would it be? Well, Zana, I can't necessarily say I would choose one thing. I actually have two things that I would recommend for people. The first one is plant native. There are a lot of plants that are beautiful that we can find at our garden departments and at nurseries, but unfortunately they're not native plants. And so I do always encourage people to plant native in their yards, in their gardens, or in green spaces, because those native plants are what will attract native insects, native birds, and it helps in some cases to allow those species to continue. And the second thing is what I already said is, refraining from insecticide use as much as possible. I'm I'm not saying that, wholly getting rid of insecticides is necessarily the best course of action. I would, say that if there were ever an insecticide that could, target one thing, that would be better than just a wholesale blanket use of insecticide across an area. But I think that if we were to plant native and encourage native insects and birds and other animals to come in, that would help keep the balance that we need to see to keep some things in control. So that would be my two things.
John, I wanted to mention that we will be partnering with Congaree National Park on a possible Synchronized Fireflies event, but keep tuned to our webpage at kc12000years.com and our 12,000 Year History Park Facebook page for more information on that. I wanted to mention that we will be around March 30th, we're going to have a session with our partner, the Midlands Master Naturalist Association. We're going to focus on butterflies at that event. So stay tuned for that. I'll be sending more information out. I would ask John, what do you consider are there important endangered insects, species, and what is the main threat to them today, and what can the public do to help that?
So for congaree, I don't know if we have any insects specifically that are on like the threatened or endangered list. We have so many insects, from butterflies to bees to all kinds of different species that I'd have to go look through that list to see if any are on that endangered list or threatened list, and that could be state or federally threatened. But I do think the biggest threat the insects are facing, and the beneficial insects, is just the widespread use of insecticides. That's something we're hearing from a lot of scientists, a lot of entomologists, and people who are studying insect populations and different insect populations. Honeybees are one that has gotten a lot of attention of late because we have been seeing a decrease in their populations. I mean, a lot of this started out, in the 60s when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, talking about how, widespread insecticide use wasn't just taking care of, taking out insects, but it was causing harm to a lot of other different life as well, from our birds of prey who were beginning to decrease in population because that those chemicals were getting into the water, which then got into their food, which then got into their body systems and caused brittle eggs. And so I think the biggest thing that we need to do is just be very cognizant of what we're using, because, like I said, at times it may be necessary to use something to get rid of, say, fire ants. Fire ants are an invasive species. They are not native to the United States. They're becoming much more increasingly widespread. They're not something we want in our yard. Our kids, our pets, we ourselves, we can accidentally get into one of those nests and not know it, and that hurts. So taking care of things that we don't need around needs to be done, but we need to just be very cognizant of what we're doing to the area around us when we use those kind of things.
Okay, other questions for John? Well, if there are no other questions, I think, insects are all around us. They permeate our lives. There are a lot of questions about them. There are lots of benefits of insects. I think that's one thing we want people to take away. And John, you're doing a great job describing all of that. Again, I wanted to point out that we'll be doing a program on butterflies on March 30th. And then we also have, on March 16th, we're getting back to our cultural resources to talk about the forts along the Cherokee Path. This time we'll be talking about from Congaree up to Fort Prince George and Fort Loudon. So join us for that. Stay tuned to our webpage at kc12000years.com and our 12,000 Year History Park Facebook page for updates. You can email me with questions at jhjameson, Jameson, @yahoo.com. If there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone for participating. We want to not ignore our natural resources. At the 12,000 Year Park, we're most known for our cultural resources with the 18th century forts and the Civil War battlefield, but natural resources are extremely important. And of course, when people came into the park or into the Midlands, they had to cope with the landscape and the natural landscape. And an interesting part of that is how what they encountered and how they coped with it. So it's important to understand natural resources and what we have special to learn about and appreciate. So John, thank you. Thanks to Congaree National Park. Everyone there, give them my regards. We will see you back hopefully on March 16th and March 30th and other events that we have planned. Thank you for attending. I'll welcome your questions if you send them. Everyone take care and stay safe.
Have a
Thank
good day,
you.
everyone. Hopefully
Thank
we'll
you.
see you at the park soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.